So yesterday it occurred to me something extraordinary. And as I did a little bit of research into it, it became infinitely more extraordinary. At the very beginning of this COVID, there are three types of reactions. One reaction is kind of fear and panic. The other reaction is kind of, why is God doing this to us? But both of those reactions miss the point because they see reality as fixed. Reality can change in 1 second. This is like a computer. I've studied computer programming. Everything on your computer, especially today where there's access from outside, 1 second it can disappear, it can reappear, it can appear in any way. There's no reality. There's only what the creator of it wants it to be. So the deeper question you always have to ask when something happens is not, why me? But rather, what's the message? Why? Why is this happening? At all times, there's what's called Avodas Hashem. There's a service. My grandfather, who had the great privilege of having a radio show for about 50 years on the Tanya, his book from that show, Lessons in Tanya, became a bestseller, translated into 5 languages. So he learned the Tanya from a very great Rabbi Friedman who was in Poland. I think he had come from Russia originally, I'm not sure. And he had a tradition, the exact words of the Tanya, he was a very holy man. And when the Nazis, Yamach Shemam V'Zichra, may their name be obliterated and erased, came to Poland, so obviously there was certain disbelief, but at a certain time it was obvious what was happening. People were trapped and they were going to be murdered. So this rabbi, they had a farbrengen and they were getting together, they were speaking. So he discussed it. And he said, what is the avodah? What is it that God demands of us now? Because at any moment in time, there's an avodah, there's a purpose, there's something you're called to do. And he says the avodah is to accept it with joy. There was a great chassid by the name of Reb Itcha de Masmid. And he was, I'm not sure exactly where he was, but what happened was the synagogue that the Nazis, Yamach Shemam V'Zichram, the bastards, the evil sadists, they put a whole bunch of Jews in the synagogue and they lit it aflame. So what did Rabbi Itcha do? There were certain people that jumped out of the windows, so they were able to report it. He took out the Torahs and he made a blessing. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with the commandment of sacrificing our lives for God. So they took out the Torahs and they thanked God for the mitzvah to give their life to God. So in that moment, which so many could be so desperate, here are individuals who can see the call of God. And it occurred to me, it's not my wisdom, from the great Kabbalists of our time, and it's a very big principle. And it's super critical that you learn this, because this is what this whole story is about. And whether we like it or not, we will get this lesson. I mean, I've learned it the very, very, very hard way in my life. And I think it's usually the only way we get it, but we can also get it in a very good way, though it's so difficult to break ourselves free from it that it's perhaps the greatest addiction that exists, that usually it can only come through deep, deep, deep suffering and pain. So I'm here to prevent you from that. So all of us have a past, a present, and a future. And you might think the past is your history, and the present is your current state, and the future is whatever you can imagine. But that's not reality. Reality begins in a space and time, actually beyond space and time, in which you never existed, nothing existed. There was no existence. Existence didn't exist. You can't even say the name existence on it. There was nothing. And God, like a parent wants to have a child for they love the child unconditionally. It's nothing to do with ego. It's to do with unconditional sensitivity and love. Desire to have us. And He birthed us. And it's a big subject. I'm not going to go into it because it's a lot of information. But the bottom line of birth, actually, if you think about it, it's not the fact that you exist. The rock exists also. It's the fact that you know you exist. The rock doesn't know it exists. You know you exist. But how do you know you exist? Now, there was a philosopher that said, I think, therefore I am. So my retort to that is, who is the am that is thinking? You can't say, I exist because I think. But who's thinking? Who is the existence? So the point is, you have an independent consciousness that is aware of your own existence. That's what makes your existence unique. Now, that awareness had to come from somewhere. Without going into too much background of previous worlds and higher spiritual realms that we come from, but on a very simple psychological level, when you're born, you're not aware that you exist. And you might have emotions. But by the time you're 2, you have a fully fledged identity. That's what a 2-year-old's throwing tantrums. He didn't get his way, he's upset. So in other words, our brains are supercomputers. By 2 years old, a child can speak no more than a grown ape. So this is something that they have decent minds. They've lived 50 years. But a 2-year-old child, human child, knows more. Right? They begin to speak, etc., etc. So we form the belief that we exist. Of course, we see ourselves as our body. But the truth of the matter is, that's not the goal of life, that you should just get your way. Because that's really what existence, at least ego existence, the physical body, just the matter of it, is like a rock. It has no needs. It just exists. To change the state won't make a difference to it. It's atoms. But there's a part of the body that senses pain and pleasure. So you don't want pain, you do want pleasure. But that's not really your consciousness. That's not your identity. That's not your knowledge. That's not your higher self. It's just like an animal. It feels as even a worm can feel pain or this. It has an instinct. Your higher self is an awareness. But that awareness is stuck. It's trapped. It's trapped in a great, what's called klippa, a great shell, great cover. Because the truth of who you are is divine. The divine is the essence of your soul, which is why we're compassionate, why we sense there's a higher truth. 84% of the world believes in a higher power. However, that truth is trapped in the ego. And what is the ego? The desire to get my way. And so, the ego, the shell, because what is addiction? In the end of the day, an addiction is just a desire. If the person didn't want the drug, they wouldn't be going for it. Right? And when do they change? When they hit rock bottom. So they decide that they don't want it now. So in other words, it's desire that's running us. And so, this klippa is an addiction, and something has to break the desire to get your way. And the way that's broken is through, usually, it could be done in a positive way, which I'll tell you how to do it soon, but usually it's broken through not getting your way, right? The little child that's throwing a tantrum, how do they learn that they don't get their way? By not getting their way. That's why by the time they overcome that, whatever, maybe a half a year or so, they're very docile, they're very sweet, because they don't expect to get their way. They're nice people because they can deal with the fact that some things you get, some things you don't get. But the moment you get things and you expect to get things, and often in life, for whatever reason, I don't want to go make this too long, the ego comes back. And then you become like that little child, you throw tantrums, you need to get your way. It's not a healthy reality at all. So the bottom line of life is that, and this is how you do it without being kind of trapped, without not getting your way. Because part of life, part of the ego is good, to have a drive. But the point is, it's like fire. Fire is a very powerful energy, or like a car. If it goes rampant, it's destructive. But if it's channeled, it's constructive. And so that's the whole goal, to channel our ego and our fire and our passion in the right realm. And so the way you do it is, first of all, you have to break your pride. And the way you do that is you have to remember everything evil that you've ever done. And the next thing you do is you give up the desire to get your way. It doesn't matter to me if I get my way or I don't get my way. That doesn't matter. The only thing that matters to me is if God gets his way. And when you do that, you reconstruct your very identity away from being the person that has to get the way is this body, which is the instincts, which is pleasure or pain or pride or shame, to your essence, your soul, which is goodness and kindness, Torah, mitzvahs, love and unity. Sometimes it means standing up for the oppressed, righteousness. And this is the mechanism to redeem yourself. And when we do this, when we're internally redeemed, we bring, and again, I'm not going through the sources, but this is absolutely correct, we bring redemption, literally the resurrection of the dead, to the entire world. So ask yourself now, do you think you and the world can use redemption?